Welcome to the Winning in Business podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Rissy, and I love talking to business professionals, leaders, and entrepreneurs who are winning in business. Are you ready to reach your next level of success? If so, join us on the Winning in Business podcast as I interview entrepreneurs, business professionals, and leaders who share how they've risen to success. Before we begin, go ahead, hit subscribe and the notification button so you'll be notified each time a new episode is released. Plug in and settle in. You're about to be inspired to rise up to your next level of success. Welcome back to another episode of Winning in Business. Today, I am here with Jenn Whitmer, and Jenn and I have known each other for quite a long time. So I am so excited to have you on the show today and interviewing you. And let me share a little bit about you, just so our listeners have some context here. So Jenn Whitmer helps leaders with Joyosity, creating positive and profitable culture with complex teams. As an international keynote and TEDx speaker and Enneagram specialist, Jenn helps organizations retain employees, increase efficiency, solve conflict, and cultivate communication so that work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Usually, that means a lot of laughter. Jenn holds graduate certifications in music education, theology, and leadership, along with a Master of Arts in Communication and Culture from Webster University and certification as an Enneagram coach. While not at all secretly wanting her life to just be a musical, Jenn lives in St. Louis, Missouri with her husband, Michael, their 4 kids, and a surly cat that puts up with them all. As a speaker, consultant, and Joyosity podcast host, Jenn has stood in front of thousands of people, helping them develop the skills to improve their teams. And she's ready to help you restore the joy of work, creating a healthy workplace culture that is people first and purpose driven. Oh, Jenn, so welcome. I feel like we're going to have so much to dive into today. And I love that every time I see you, you are always smiling and always laughing and happy. And although I'm sure life has ups and downs for you, like it does the rest of us, I know that you always just like Joyosity. I love that. I love that word because I really associate that with you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So, okay. So to get us started, just like, how did you get into what you're doing? I mean, we just listened to your bio, right? That you've done all the things. So just kind of give us the rundown of what led you to where you are now.
Well, the Marvel origin story. Really, I began my career as an educator. So I was a teacher, and then I had a lot of kids really fast and stayed home, and then went back into doing other types of work, sort of freelance education type based things, and then went into school administration. And I was really in my dream job. I loved it. I was at a private school that was thriving, that was putting purpose and meaning into education, not just facts and figures, really teaching a whole child that was emotional and spiritual and academic and community based. And my kids were there and I loved it. And we had a change of leadership that he was just unhealed and unskilled, that devastated our culture in a way that was really grievous. And I see the healing that has happened in my life and what has come from that. But at the time, it was incredibly painful. And if you've ever been in a toxic work environment, it's numbing and confusing. And I didn't quite know what to do. I was always going to be an educator. This is what I did. And the next step was going to be teaching pre-service teachers at the university level. Like, this was what I was going to continue in educational leadership. And it was such a horrible situation. I can remember one meeting, just really sitting in the parking garage, like on the bumper of my van, like, I think this is over. And just feeling that depth of sadness about that, of the culture has changed. I'm being pushed out. And, it was really awful. And from that came like, what do I want to do? There was a healing process, there was all of this, but the thing that I do, and now I do with clients, is what's that golden thread of joy that has always been in your life? What's the thing that always comes up? People, you're like, yeah, but that doesn't everybody know how to do that? That it's magic to other people, but it's just normal for you, but still brings you so much joy. And started really investigating that. I went back to school because, that's what teachers do. Yeah. And let's go get another master's. That will solve all the problems. Right. And so I did that and did a lot of interviews and really discovered how much I loved the public speaking aspect of training, of working with parents and training teachers and the professional development and the work that I got to do in impacting individual teachers and teams, and which changed the culture. And so I started down that path, and I just didn't know really that speaking was a job. I just didn't know that was a thing that people did. And so started on that process and have been doing that now for about 5 years and love it. Love the opportunities to prevent the toxic culture that I experienced, to help people heal from those types of workplace and home experiences, because they come into the workplace so much because we are whole people living whole lives and we show up wherever we are. And so that work has been so meaningful to me to help really impact individuals, and workplaces, which really impacts families and communities. Yes. And has such a ripple effect into our just general well-being of helping people learn how to work better together, how to communicate clearly. The issue that kept coming up in this workplace that was so damaging was that conflict is so bad. Y'all don't know how to have conflict. That was kind of one of the things that kept happening. And I started in conflict resolution, but really discovering that conflict is just the presenting injury, and you have to really dig deeper. And so that work has been just so meaningful to me, and had such a joy doing it and seeing the impact that it's having in the world.
I love that. I feel like in that way, our paths are a little bit similar, because as a former educator also, when I started doing this, I knew that in working with, primarily I started working with women, right? And helping women really with life and stress and all the things that go with that. I knew it would trickle down into the kids. Right? Yes. Because when you can impact families, then it trickles down into the kids in the education system, right? Yes. So all the teachers thank Jenn and I. No, I'm just kidding. As we are still making an impact in the world to That's help everyone. But anyway, okay. So what are for you? What are the big ahas that you have learned along the way that you feel like have contributed to your success?
Yeah. There's a few. Okay. I think the one I've been thinking a lot about just recently because of what I'm doing in my work has been how you can't lead anybody else until you lead yourself.
Yes.
Like that leading of me as a leader of, a staff and faculty of like 50, 55 people, or when I was leading a small team, I can do anything for anybody else until I was really practicing it myself. And sometimes, especially when you're a parent, you can be like, hey, do as I say and not as I do. And sometimes that's really fair and appropriate, but in other times it's not. Like you have to be willing to do the hard work yourself. You have to be willing to, if you're going to ask your team to do things, if you're going to want to take people somewhere, you have to go there first. And so that idea of I can't lead anybody else until I lead myself. And I think some leadership programs, some start there, but most kind of like just spend a hot second there. And then they move on to like, how do you communicate and how do you, make good decisions and how do you, like they think that that's leadership 101 when really leadership 101 is who are you? Yes. How do you talk to yourself and other people? And what do you value and want to do in the world? Like that exploration of self is really the first step of leadership. So I think that big aha has happened over time. But I think that revelation, even when I was leading in a school, was like, I can't do this unless I am willing to do it myself. I cannot take people further than I'm willing to go. So I think that creates not only genuine leadership that is authentic and effective, it also builds trust and collaboration in a different way than when you just come and are like, I'm the leader now, or whatever. And so that leadership skill of leading yourself first helps you also, me, not sacrifice myself on the altar of doing it for everybody else.
Yes.
So that when I have to lead myself first, that means I have to say, I have to set boundaries. I have to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be the one that learns that. I tend to be more like a reservoir that can pour out rather than that dry, crusty bread that is just, or, ditch that's really just sacrificing everything and all the bad things happen. But I'm sacrificing, as we were taught to do as women.
Yeah.
And I think that's just such an ineffective and debilitating way to live your life, let alone lead. So I think those are some of the big ahas that I've had. I mean, there are others, but that's the one I've been thinking a lot about recently, because a lot of people don't think that they're a leader. And I'm like, did you get up today? You had to
Right.
get yourself out of bed. That's leadership.
Yes. Yes.
And you had to decide, am I going to actually brush my teeth or not? What am I going to put in my body? How am I going to do that? Like all of
Yeah.
that is leadership. And so
Yes.
when people are like, oh, I'm not a leader. And I'm like, well, if you're not leading yourself, you're right. You're not. But if you are,
Mhm.
then we can start somewhere.
Yes. Yes. And I look at we, yes, leaders of ourselves. I feel like we're all leaders somewhere. You
Totally.
know what I mean? Like it may
Yeah.
not be, I feel like even in different capacities, wherever we are still a leader in some way. But if you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you're a leader at work or whatever, you're a leader at home, or
Yeah.
maybe you're a leader at church, or maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like somewhere in some capacity, I truly do feel like most people are leaders.
I 100% agree. In fact, I have a previous client of mine that was trying to kind of figure out what she wanted. She was in a transition space, and she really was curious about the Enneagram, which is a personality framework I use. And so she wanted to do some coaching to kind of figure out this transition space. And so we met for several months, and her biggest revelation was this idea of, I am a leader because I lead myself. And she
Yeah.
had a young child at the time. He was like 9 months. I think his first birthday celebrated while we were coaching. And now, 3-ish years later, she runs her own agency. She
Mhm.
has a couple team members. She has another child. And that idea that I lead myself and I lead where I influence, which is a John Maxwell concept,
Mhm.
like leading, using your influence, it has transformed her life in so many ways. Like, I'm not going to take all the credit for, she did the work, but just that
Right.
little nugget of shift of mindset that I have to lead myself and therefore I am a leader. Well, I can lead my family, and as with my children, I can lead an agency and run this
Mhm.
business. And anyway, so it's just, I think that little nugget, if you see, where do I lead now, rather than, oh, I'm not a leader because I don't have this VP title, or I'm not a
Right.
leader because I don't own something. It's a it's a real misnomer in the world, and it
Mhm.
and it causes a lot of people to stay small and stuck because they have that story that I'm not a leader. When you're leading somewhere.
Yeah. So you are an Enneagram expert. Um, what would you like to share about the
Yeah.
Enneagram?
So if you're listening, you're like, Enya, what? What are these vowels coming out of your mouth? So it's 4 syllables, Enneagram, if you're listening. So it is a personality framework. And I have always been a personality junkie. Like,
Yes, me too.
I mean, love them. I did Myers-Briggs when I was a freshman in college, and freshman emerging leaders, the 20 of us in this group, and then I used it again as a school leader, and I used strengths finders and disc. And I mean, a good BuzzFeed quiz on which Harry Potter house, Gryffindor, I mean, I love it. But what I found when I rediscovered the Enneagram, because initially I hated it. Like when I was in college, I was like, this thing is scary. I don't know. What is it? Blah, blah, blah. I don't like it.
Oh.
I just
Mhm.
kind of rejected it. When I was reintroduced to it, actually in the middle of this really difficult, toxic work environment, I started to discover the depth of what the Enneagram shows us. And what it is it shows us why we think, act, and feel the way we do. Whereas a lot of other personality tools, which are fantastic, I still use them, show us what or how, or other
Mhm.
people's impressions of us, which is a key piece of self-awareness. But the Enneagram shows us this kind of unknown part that we either have been trying to keep hidden, or we haven't had words to label.
Yeah.
And so that's what I have found to be the most transformative about the Enneagram as a personality framework, because it shows up in every text message you send somebody, when you are talking to a client, when you are communicating with your mother, when you're trying to figure out at the grocery, why is this line so long? Like all of these things, it shows up everywhere you go. And when you have that level of self-awareness to understand why, then you can do something with it. Because if you only know what, you just try to change your behavior and then you go back or you come up with a new bad habit. So the why is such an important piece. And it also, I think, I would say that you transform when you look at the parts of yourself you've tried to keep hidden. And
Yeah.
that is what the Enneagram
Yes.
helps you see, because you can't, it's in your blind spot, really. You don't
Yeah.
quite know what's there. So
Now,
it's a
now,
super
question
helpful
for
tool.
you.
Yeah.
As you transform, as you become more aware of
Mhm.
yourself, as you work on your mindset, your emotions, all of those things, does your Enneagram ever change?
Great question. No. So it does not. You become the healthier or sometimes your favorite version of yourself. The one that, so in super fast personality theory, your personality is not your habits. Your personality is not what you do. Your personality is not how you think. Your personality is the way that you see the world.
Mhm.
And that part doesn't really change. But what you can do is do something with the way you see the world. Now that I know that's how I see, now I can change something. So, for example, if I like to use those glasses, so if I'm wearing bright blue glasses and you, Kelly, are wearing pink glasses, we're going to see the world a little bit differently. And it could be a cause of all kinds of confusion and concern, But as you become more and more aware, it's like your glasses become less opaque and more transparent. And you're like, oh, I can see different ways. I can see different processes. I'm still motivated by that, but I am not controlled by my personality. This is trying to protect me. And another word, if you've done any basic psychology, it's the ego.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you
Yes.
safe. But when you can see it, you're like, it's okay, personality. I'm in charge. You don't need to drive the bus. And you
Yes.
become this more peaceful, joyful version of yourself. Not that things don't get hard, not that you, but you start to shed this automatic protection layer
Yeah.
and be able to make better, more informed choices around the way that you process, the way that you think, the way you interpret a story, reframing, all the mindset stuff, and
Yeah.
which then turns into different behaviors.
Yes. I feel like when we are aware enough that we can see our hidden motives, our
Mm-hmm.
own hidden motives that
Yep.
are keeping us stuck in something, right?
I mean,
That's
in
like,
the mud. That's the
yeah,
quicksand we train for as kids. Like it's not actual quicksand. It's
yes.
our own motives that keep us stuck.
Yes. And when you can be aware of those,
Mm-hmm.
then I mean life can really be easier because you can
So
see
much
them and
easier.
you can transform, you can change, you can find a different perspective, you can
Yeah.
recontextualize it, you can do all these different things to really help you not stay stuck.
100%. So, like, for example, the Enneagram is 9 different personality types,
Mhm.
and they're labeled 1 through 9. And I'm an Enneagram 7. And so,
Okay.
my big motivation is I want to avoid pain at all costs. No, thank you. I do not want it. Now, everybody wants to avoid pain. All 9 Enneagram motivations, everybody has them, but there's one that I like to say is driving your bus. They're all riding, one's driving. And so,
Mhm.
for me, that's avoiding pain. And I don't want to feel limited. I don't want to feel trapped. Idealism is really important to me because if it's ideal, then I don't experience pain. It comes all around. So because I know that, so for example, I hate making hard phone calls. I am fighting right now, this day, with a medical provider who tried to send us a bill 2 years after dates of service. It's a whole thing. Anyway, and if I didn't know why I wanted to avoid that, I would continue to let that just go and
Yeah.
suffer the consequences of that. And now that's kind of a funny example, but you can think of all kinds of things that you might do if you're an Enneagram 7, you're like, yeah, doesn't everybody want to avoid pain? And it doesn't want to be limited, that we avoid because it's boring or it's challenging. Whereas somebody who is an Enneagram 1, if it's not perfect, because they've got this really intense inner critic that's telling them they got to do it right, you got to do it right, you got to do it right, you're not good, they're going to
Mhm.
they're going to be hypercritical of themselves and others, which turns into this really abusive internal life.
Yes.
And
Yep.
so you can't ever fix it. Well, that's either also no way to live. So when you're aware of that, I can go, oh, wait, I'm trying to avoid this. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but
Yes.
This is
Yes.
better. Future me will be more grateful if I do this. And it actually won't be that painful. We'll get through it, or as it, every type has their own story that they have and narrative that they live in. But that's just an example of that level of awareness when, oh, when I do that, here's what's really happening, or here's what I'm trying to get. So what's a healthier way to cope with that? What's a healthier way to get what I'm needing right now?
And when I talk about stress personalities, when I do my stress and my stress personalities, they actually came from a combination of of things that I've learned along the way. But one of them was the Enneagram, right? I mean, perfectionism is a stress personality.
Oh, sure.
Because you will end up stressing yourself out over the perfectionism, right? Of it. You know what I mean? So using some things like that. So I really do enjoy the Enneagram as well. So that's awesome. Okay. So I always ask this question, what challenges do you face as a business owner?
Me.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna say I am really hard to manage. That is my biggest. I mean, honestly, I'm kidding, but I'm not. Like that is honestly the biggest challenge is figuring out me and what roadblocks I'm putting in my own way. Either ones that I see, like that are a little more intentional, or some that I don't see. And so for me, what I have done to move past that is really invest in coaching. Like that's the thing that has changed my own leadership and owning a business has been investing in the idea that I need outside input to help me along the way, and that is worth it. That ROI is exponential. I mean, I feel it in my own self, but I also see the research results of it too. And like I want to say, like, if you invest for every $1,000 you invest in coaching, it is like a 6x return, like 6x return of what you get out of that. And that goes for businesses as well, who invest in their leaders, who invest in that type of professional development. And it makes such a difference. So the biggest things that I face are really figuring out what are the things that I'm going to avoid. And then is that something I need to do? Or is that something that I need to hire out? Is that something that actually even needs to be done? That type of work. And that's where coaching can be really helpful because it helps with clarity. So I think I genuinely am the biggest one. And then like super practically, I am always struggling with like, how do I talk about my business like that? How do I tell people what I do without them thinking I'm selling them? Because I'm not. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. But I think a lot of business owners, and particularly women, we feel that because we've really been enculturated to play ourselves down. And so when you really stand in your freedom and just who you are, some people get real scared. And so I have had to learn to just be okay with that and know that I'm just telling you how I help the world, and I want you to come along with me versus like, hey, will you buy from me? Or, oh, you don't care. It's fine. That kind of small, making yourself, kind of contorted into that little ball. And so figuring out, I think that's always a challenge. The mindset is there. Now it's just kind of the skill. Like, where do we post about that? Like, do you buy an ad? Do you not? Like, I think that's kind of a struggle in my business that I come back to frequently.
I think that's a common struggle. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say it like you just said it. And yet I think that is very common.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's common even when I work with women leaders. And so like I host a retreat for women leaders who are mostly in the corporate space. Some of them are business owners, but some of them aren't. They're trying to do the same thing without having the backlash in the corporate space of being a conniving woman. Like that story comes up. And so I think we face that a lot whenever we're trying to share about who we are and what we do. If you are owning a business, that's the marketing aspect. If you're in a corporate setting. So I think just know that if you're listening, that's not an uncommon feeling. You're not crazy and you can move past that.
And I think we have to just remember that it's just our job to share. And we can never control how anyone is going to perceive how we share, right? That we can't conceive that they're going to go, well, she's overbearing, well, whatever words they come up with, right? Like that's not on us. That's on them. And
somebody said one time, I love this idea and I struggle with it all the time because I want to control the narrative. Like I want to control the narrative about me in other people's heads. And I can't. It's not my job. And like it's actually not my business what other people think of me inside their own heads. And that's just such a hard concept, but it is so freeing when you get there.
Yes, yes, yes. And somewhere along the line, as women, when we were little, that's a belief that we were taught. You know what I mean? Like that is a belief that
all of it.
And you really have to, I say you, me.
Yep.
I mean, that was something I really had to work on. You know what I mean? There's several things that you have mentioned that it's like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of work on that. I've worked with coaches. I've done the work myself. I've put it into practice. I mean, it really does take intention.
No, yeah. And it is real work. I mean, going back to the brain science of it, because I could nerd out for a super long time, because you are literally rewiring synapses. And if you think about if you've ever gone to the gym, you know, and lifted a little bit of weight and you're like, oh, this is kind of hard, you know, like you get to that point where your muscles bring up. That's what you're doing internally. And that's why it feels hard. But oh my gosh, once you've rewired it, that synapse is there. And it's like this, now it's a super highway to freedom.
Yeah. And it's so much more empowering to live that way. Yeah. Okay. So what are your goals in business? We are now in 2024. So what are your goals in business? Share one or two. Oh my gosh.
Oh, why does this feel so awkward? I just even talked about it. See, we don't always move past it all the time. So I think really what I see that I want to help the world is really spread this idea. My big crazy vision is to transform global workplace culture. Like that's what I want to do. So work is a joy and people are whole and organizations flourish. And to do that, equipping leaders to have engaged and empowered teams and create that joyosity, that flourishing workplace, happy, positive culture that is also profitable, like doing that work, I think looks a few different ways. Like I love a good arena keynote. Like that is where I'm headed. I love that. I love the joy of a community experience of learning. I've never lost that from teaching. Like there's something about that community experience. It also just feels super efficient. Like there's all these people and we're all learning at the same time. So I love that arena keynote speaking and like starting to move there into that space. And then I also really love the work that I'm doing in a couple companies that I want to scale in really creating a joyosity culture where I work with them over time. So it's like a 9 to 18 month process of really digging in with people and coaching and consulting and training. And then the super fun one are these retreats, these women leader retreats. I'm starting small and in my hometown, you know, here in St. Louis. But I really want to take that on the road, and not just because I love to travel, because let me tell you, I love to travel, but all the stuff that we try to keep hidden and that we cope with on a daily basis in our space that we're comfortable with our regular routines, all that goes away when you travel.
Yes.
So it's easier to see those things that you've kept hidden. And actually transformation is faster. Again, coming back to this fun efficiency. So we're in a really fun space, but it also helps you see things that you didn't know were there because you've kept them covered with routines and coping mechanisms, which is great, except now you can be free of that. So that kind of leadership retreat with some high level women in small groups in really amazing places around the world, that's where I want to go.
Oh, that's awesome. And because I know you, like I already see all of that for you. You know what I mean? Like I see you doing all that. So, and it's interesting. We both have music theater backgrounds.
Yes.
So when people like, there's so many people that are like public speaking, right? Like literally they would like rather die than public speak. Right. And it fills me up. Like from that, if I don't know, I spent so many years on stage, quote unquote, right? And it is a shared experience and all of that. But now I'm not in New York. I'm not in theater. I'm not whatever, but speaking kind of fills that up for me, to be honest. I'm just being honest.
100%. In fact, I really had to get over the fact that I felt that way, like, because I felt guilty about feeling like that. And I think sometimes, even if public speaking isn't your thing, whatever you're really good at, if somebody told you that wasn't good at some point, you might have some guilt around that. And I had to really get over the fact that it's okay that I want to stand on a stage and help thousands of people at the same time. And I cannot deny that I come away from that so full, knowing that it is just like, it is a resonant experience.
Yeah.
Like this is what I am meant. It is a grounding, resonant experience. Like this is what I am meant to do in the world.
Yes.
And it feels so right and so good. And it is, the fruit of it is so right and so good that it like that is how you know it's right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. Okay. So what is an accomplishment that you're really proud of that you'd like to share?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. I think there's a few. So one of them, I'm really proud of my kids, like that they're mostly well-adjusted people in the world. Our oldest is 21 and our youngest is 14. And the four of them, not that they are problem-free, but I think there's just a lot of work that kids that age have had to do that is so different, some because of the pandemic, some is because of our culture now. And I'm just really proud of them. Like I know that I didn't do all the work, that they had to do the work, but I'm really proud of them. I'm really proud that I actually left an industry that I was in for 20 years. That was all I ever wanted to do. I ever wanted to do. I couldn't imagine anything else. That I'm now doing things that I didn't even know were possible, like just didn't even know they existed in the world. And that owning a business is really hard. And that's why most businesses fail within the first few years. And so doing the real work of plotting, the last year I keep saying, I'm really good at plotting. Like just plod, PLOD, like plod. One step at a time. I can plod. And if it's in the right direction, plotting is actually incredible. Like it really gets you somewhere. And so I'm really proud of that.
Good. And can we take a minute, since you didn't bring this up, and talk about that you have a TEDx?
Oh,
you're a TEDx speaker.
I am a TEDx speaker. That was really fun. It was in Canada. It was great. It was kind of a wild experience. That was, oh yeah. And a TEDx is it's one of those things like, it really puts you through the ringer in a different way than a keynote. And because there's just so much pressure on it because everybody knows this name. And then you have to release that. Again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, you can't control what the other people are going to take away. So it's a similar experience of that. So yeah, so the TEDx was great. I think a couple other big places that I have spoken that I'm really proud of are a really large Chick-fil-A conference that was pretty amazing, where there were 10,000 people there. That was phenomenal. I spoke at the State Department this year, and that I spoke around conflict resolution just a few days after the war started in the place with the people who negotiate with others on our behalf around the world to try to keep peace. And I'm talking to them about interpersonal peace and conflict resolution. Like that was such a meta weighty experience that was really such a really cool accomplishment.
So can we take a minute for any listeners out there that you probably feel like Jenn right now is just this superhuman because of all the things.
Can I show you my broken nail right there? Like, like let's just,
So let's go back for just a minute. I don't even know how to frame my question right now. Like, where do you get the confidence, the risk taking, here you are at the State Department speaking to leaders, like, does imposter syndrome come in? And if so, like, how are you dealing with all of these things?
Yeah.
Because, it sounds so like, oh, I just talked to 10,000 people in front of Chick-fil-A in the State Department and I have a TEDx, right? But what do you do? You know what I mean? Like, there has to be some mindset piece for you to get there to do that.
100%. And it's not just one. It's not just there was a one-time thing and now I'm fixed. It's great. I never struggle. And, so there's a few things that have been so helpful to me in mindset. One of them is my speaker coach, Sally. She says all the time, use risk as your compass. And I just love that. It's such a helpful North Star that I line up with my values. So I have 5 values I talk about all the time, and joy, connection, curiosity, flourishing, and valor. And so when I think about using risk as your compass and valor, like I value that. So I have to step into that. And it's a behaving as if, even if I don't always feel it. Because internally, I want that, even if I don't yet have the practice doing it all the time. And so it's a little bit of you have to do in order to get. Yes. And so that's one piece, like using risk as your compass was really, really helpful. And then I noticed myself when I have the most imposter syndrome. I was speaking to an agency in Minneapolis this past summer. And I was just kind of like getting all nervous. I happened to know the people who own the agency like before when I really first started my business. So it was like 5 years ago. And I wanted to do well for them because I knew my husband as well. Like it just felt high pressure. I knew a couple other people that were close friends in the group. It's just like, I was all iggy about it. And I was realizing it's because I was looking at me. I was super focused on me, not, I have this gift that I get to share with them. And what do I want for them at the end of this? Now, I'm not responsible for that, but if I think about, here's what I want for them at the end, it really, it helps get over the imposter syndrome when I start to get all up in my head about it. And for me, that often feels like this like internal, like my shoulders kind of come in and I just start to feel this like, ooh, like that's the best way I can describe it. Yeah. And when I know, so that's like paying attention to your body to know, when this is what that feels like, that probably means this. And I can get curious about my own mindset piece. And 90% of the time I find that I'm worried about me and what's next for me, rather than being present in the moment, loving up that audience, delivering for them what they need right now to help them have more joy, more peace, better relationships, more value from work, all of that. So that's how I tend to work through that. Now, I say that I've been working on this stuff for like 10 years. Yes, so this is, it is, and I still have coaches that help me, work through these things. So just, remember all that. But I think those are the biggest things for me.
Yeah. Oh, great takeaways. Great choice. I'm glad I asked that question. I feel like that's valuable to people that are listening. So thank you for answering.
And everybody has to start as a beginner.
Yes.
You cannot start in, that's not, I think everybody
which is the biggest problem we do, right? We start comparing, we get into the comparing, and we're comparing ourselves to people that are like down the way, and we're back here at like beginner phase, and we can't do that. It's not fair to ourselves.
It's not at all, at all. Everybody has to be a beginner, even at things you love. I mean, like I think back my first speech contest that I won in 4th grade, it was terrible. But at the time I was, that was my first time. You have to have a first time, even if it's something that you love and you want to do. Everybody starts as a beginner.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So where can the listeners connect with you?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Please, if you had any thoughts, takeaways, please share them, tag me and Kelly. So that's kind of my challenge for you is like, take a moment here. Don't just listen to this podcast and like run away and like, do the dishes or go on to the next thing. What did you learn? Pause for 30 seconds. What was the one nugget? There might be more. And write it down. Either write it down like as a social post, write it in a DM, but write it down. Text your friend, tell them, because that is powerful and that will stick with you. So that is my challenge for you, listener. But so connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram. That's where I play the most. So you can find me, Jenn Whitmer, Jen Delaria Whitmer is on LinkedIn, and Jen_Whitmer on Instagram. And I have a YouTube channel because I have a podcast called Joyosity. It's a live podcast on Mondays at 1 p.m. on YouTube and LinkedIn. And now Instagram is changing. So I think it's there too.
Oh, nice.
And you can get that where you get podcasts as well, but it's live on Monday. So I love to connect with people, hear what you learned, hear what your questions are. So please, I would love to connect with you. And if you are interested in speaking and bringing me in, just contact me and we'll chat and make sure it's a good fit and we can help you solve what you're wanting to solve and create that positive culture for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I will put all of those links in the show notes so everybody can get to them quickly and easily. And yes, we would love to hear your takeaways, both of us. So Jenn, thank you so much. It's been a joy. I feel like we could talk for 3 hours.
Of course we could.
And we need to go out and keep winning in business. So, have a great rest of your day. And listeners, make sure that you share this podcast with someone that needs to hear it. Or if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. And we will see you next week for another episode of Winning in Business. Rise up and live.
Thank you for being a part of the Winning in Business podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to rise up to your next level of success, but are worried about increased stress, time for work and yourself and your family, not to mention being exhausted. I'd like to invite you to a complimentary strategy call where I'll show you how you can do it all. I'll help you reclaim time, keep your sanity, handle the chaos with ease, and move to the next level of success that you deserve and desire. I hope you found value in listening today. Please always leave your comments, feedback, or questions. We check them all. I want you to continue winning in business and reach your next level of success. See you next time.